Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. First Contact Fiasco. Dr. Sarah Chen never expected her Wednesday morning lecture on human reproductive biology to cause an interplanetary incident. Yet here she was, staring at a room full of horrified alien diplomats, their translucent antennae twitching in what she could only assume was distress. It had started normally enough. The Archeans, a highly advanced species that looked like a cross between praying mantises and jellyfish, had established their embassy on Earth just 3 months ago. As Earth's leading reproductive biologist, Sarah had been selected to give a series of lectures on human biology to promote interspecies understanding. And that concludes the basic overview of human reproductive systems, Sarah finished, clicking to the last slide. Any questions? The lecture hall erupted into chaos. The Archeans' bioluminescent bodies were flashing in rapid patterns of deep purple and red. Colors she'd been briefed indicated extreme distress or disgust. Their translator devices all activated simultaneously, creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. You mean this happens regularly? Without genetic optimization? In an uncontrolled environment? Inside your bodies? Sarah raised her hands, trying to calm the crowd. Please, one at a time. Ambassador Xylix, their lead diplomatic representative, rose to their full 3-meter height. Their voice trembled through the translator. Dr. Chen, are you suggesting that humans regularly engage in direct biological material exchange? Without proper containment protocols? Well, yes, Sarah replied, struggling to maintain her professional composure. That's how our species reproduces. It's perfectly natural. Natural? Another Archean diplomat nearly fell out of their hover seat. There is nothing natural about such barbarism. Sarah took a deep breath. She'd faced skeptical audiences before, but this was getting out of hand. I assure you, while it may seem strange to your species, human reproduction is a sophisticated biological process that has evolved over millions of years. But the risks? Ambassador Xylix's antennae were practically tied in knots. The genetic contamination. The biological hazards. And you say this happens billions of times across your planet? Without oversight? Well, there are certain social and legal frameworks. Sarah began, but was interrupted by another burst of agitated chittering. Do you mean to tell us, a junior diplomat called out, their crystalline body structure practically vibrating with horror, that humans just randomly combine genetic material? Without running compatibility algorithms? Without proper sterilization procedures? Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose. Look, when two humans love each other, this only made things worse. The word love apparently translated to something involving quantum entanglement in Archean, leading to a fresh wave of confusion and dismay. They use quantum mechanics, someone shrieked. Without proper shielding? No, Sarah tried to explain. Love is an emotional state that emotions are involved in genetic recombination? The horror in the translator's mechanical voice was almost comical. This is worse than we thought. Ambassador Xylix raised all 4 of their arms, commanding silence. Dr. Chen, they said carefully, are you telling us that humans routinely engage in unshielded biological material exchange, guided by quantum fluctuations in their neural patterns, without any proper oversight or genetic screening, in an environment exposed to atmospheric contamination, and this is your primary method of species propagation? Sarah sighed. Yes, Ambassador. Though you're making it sound much more dramatic than it is. The entire delegation moved backward as one, their bodies pulsing with waves of alarmed purple light. And this happens, frequently? Another diplomat asked, their translator barely able to convey their mix of horror and fascination. Well, not just for reproduction, Sarah said, immediately realizing her mistake. It's also recreational. The room erupted again. Several Archeans had to be helped to the medical bay, overwhelmed by the implications. Ambassador Xylix's translator crackled with static as they tried to process this new information. Recreational, they finally managed. You mean humans engage in unauthorized genetic exchange, for fun? Sarah wanted to bang her head against the podium. How had a simple biology lecture turned into a diplomatic crisis? She could already see the headlines: Human reproduction terrifies alien allies, peace treaty in jeopardy. Perhaps, she said carefully, we should take a brief recess. Give everyone a chance to process this information. Ambassador Xylix nodded gratefully, their color slowly returning to a less alarmed shade of blue. Yes, I believe that would be wise. Though I must inform you, Dr. Chen, that this information will need to be reported to the Arxian High Council. The implications for our species' interaction are significant. As the diplomats filed out, still chittering in distress, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from the UN Secretary of Human-Alien Relations. Dr. Chen, please explain why I have reports of mass panic at the Arxian embassy? And why their medical bay is suddenly full of diplomats in shock. Sarah typed back, Sir, apparently the aliens have some strong views about human reproduction. You might want to sit down for this. Looking at her lecture notes for the next session, Human Pregnancy and Childbirth, Sarah had a feeling things were about to get even more interesting. She'd need a lot more coffee for this. And somewhere, in the vast cosmic expanse, she was pretty sure whatever deity or random quantum fluctuation responsible for evolution was having a good laugh at her expense. The Arxians might be horrified, but Sarah couldn't help but feel a strange pride. Humans might be messy, complicated, and apparently terrifying to advanced alien species, but they'd managed to populate an entire planet through the power of love, biology, and what the Arxians would probably call reckless genetic experimentation. Sometimes, she thought, being human meant being just crazy enough to make the impossible work. Even if it scandalized the entire galactic community in the process. Now she just had to figure out how to explain kissing without causing an interplanetary incident. The awkward explanation. 3 days after what was now being called the reproduction incident, Sarah found herself in an even more precarious situation. The Arxian High Council had demanded a detailed presentation on human mating practices, complete with scientific explanations. To make matters worse, they'd sent their top xenobiologist, Dr. Zell 427, to observe and document everything. So, Dr. Zell said, adjusting their recording apparatus, their crystalline body refracting light across Sarah's office, please explain this dating ritual that precedes human genetic exchange. Sarah took a long sip of coffee. Well, dating is a social process where two humans spend time together to determine compatibility. Ah. Dr. Zell's antennae perked up. You do perform compatibility tests. This is reassuring. What measurements do you take? Genetic sequencing? Molecular resonance? No, Sarah replied. They usually just talk, share meals, maybe watch entertainment together. Dr. Zell's translator crackled with confusion. You determine genetic compatibility through nutrient consumption and audiovisual stimulation? It's not about genetic compatibility, Sarah explained patiently. It's about emotional and personal compatibility. These emotions, Dr. Zell said the word like it was a mysterious disease. You mentioned them before. They influence mate selection? Yes, humans typically develop romantic feelings. Wait. Dr. Zell frantically adjusted their recording device. Are you saying humans allow chemical neurotransmitter fluctuations to influence their choice of genetic recombination partners? Sarah rubbed her temples. When you say it like that, Fascinating. Dr. Zell's body pulsed with excited yellow light. And these chemical reactions, they override logical decision-making processes? Not override, exactly. They work together with Together? Dr. Zell's horror returned. You mean humans simultaneously process emotional and logical inputs when selecting mates? Without a neural firewall? Sarah was beginning to understand why the Arxians found humans so terrifying. Yes, we integrate emotional and rational thinking in our decision-making process. Dr. Zell's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been academic excitement or existential dread. And once a pair has established compatibility through these meal-sharing rituals, they proceed directly to genetic exchange? Well, no, Sarah said. Usually there's a courtship period. Getting to know each other better, physical intimacy usually develops gradually. Physical intimacy develops? Dr. Zell's translator nearly shorted out. You mean the genetic exchange process has stages? Yes, humans typically start with kissing. The next 15 minutes were spent explaining what kissing was, during which Dr. Zell had to pause 3 times to recalibrate their shock absorbers. Let me understand this correctly, they said finally. Humans press their primary nutrient intake orifices together, for pleasure? Among other things, yes. And this exchange of oral bacteria is enjoyable? When done right, Sarah couldn't help but add, immediately regretting it as Dr. Zell's color shifted to a previously unseen shade of distressed turquoise. Remarkable, Dr. Zell muttered, making rapid notes. And this leads to further physical contact? Sarah spent the next hour explaining human physical intimacy in the most clinical terms possible, while Dr. Zell's reactions ranged from scientific curiosity to pure horror and back again. But the germs, they finally exploded. The bacterial transfer. The uncontrolled exchange of biological materials. How does your species survive? We have immune systems, Sarah explained. And the exchange of bacteria can actually be beneficial. Beneficial? Dr. Zell's crystalline form briefly lost coherence. You're saying humans intentionally exchange microorganisms for mutual benefit? Well, when you put it that way. And this all happens without environmental controls? Without sterilization protocols? Without genetic firewalls? That's generally how it works, yes. Dr. Zell's recording device whirred frantically. This is unprecedented. A species that not only survives, but thrives through controlled biological chaos. The implications for evolutionary theory are staggering. Sarah felt a surge of pride. Human reproduction might seem messy to your species, but it's produced some amazing results. Our genetic diversity is one of our greatest strengths. Diversity? Dr. Zell's antennae twitched. You mean each genetic recombination produces unique results? Every human is unique, yes. Without templates? Without optimization algorithms? Nature has its own optimization process, Sarah explained. Natural selection. You leave genetic selection to chance? Dr. Zell's translator actually squeaked. Not entirely chance. There are various factors that influence But the variables. Dr. Zell was practically vibrating. The potential combinations. The sheer mathematical complexity of it all. How do you manage population genetics without central control? Sarah smiled. That's the beauty of it. Life finds a way. Dr. Zell was quiet for a long moment, their crystalline form shifting through various colors as they processed this information. Finally, they spoke. Dr. Chen, I believe I owe you and your species an apology. Oh? Sarah was surprised. Yes. We initially thought humans were reckless and primitive in their reproductive practices. But I'm beginning to understand that what we perceived as chaos is actually a different kind of order. One that operates on principles we hadn't considered possible. That's actually very insightful, Sarah said. Though, Dr. Zell added, their color shifting to a lighter shade, I still find the idea of kissing absolutely terrifying. Sarah laughed. That's fair. Though I have to ask, how do Archeans reproduce? Dr. Zell's color immediately shifted to embarrassed pink. We exchange carefully filtered genetic material through quantum-encrypted data transfers in sterile laboratory conditions. That sounds very efficient, Sarah said diplomatically. Yes, Dr. Zell agreed, sounding almost wistful. Though I must admit, your way sounds more interesting. As Dr. Zell packed up their recording equipment, they paused. Dr. Chen, would you be willing to provide more detailed information about these dating rituals? For scientific purposes, of course. Of course, Sarah smiled. Though maybe we should start with something simple. Would you like to get coffee sometime? Dr. Zell's translator crackled with what might have been laughter. Ah yes, the sharing of stimulant-laden beverages as a social bonding ritual. How very human. As they left her office, Sarah couldn't help but feel that this might be the start of a beautiful, if highly unusual, friendship. And maybe, just maybe, humans and Arxians would find more common ground than they expected. Even if that common ground involved a lot of hand sanitizer. Scientific curiosity unleashed. The news of Sarah's ongoing cultural exchange with Dr. Zell had spread through both human and Arxian communities, leading to an unexpected development, the establishment of the first-ever joint Human-Arxian Institute for Reproductive Studies. Of course, getting the institute up and running proved to be an adventure in itself. And oh, absolutely not. Dr. Zell's crystalline form flashed with alarm as they inspected the proposed laboratory plans. We cannot have the human researchers and Arxian researchers sharing the same air filtration system. Do you know how many bacterial particles humans release just by breathing? Sarah, who had been appointed co-director alongside Dr. Zell, sighed. We've been over this. Human bacteria aren't harmful to Arxians. Your biochemistry is completely different. It's not about harm, Dr. Zell insisted. It's about proper experimental conditions. How can we maintain a sterile environment with humans, human ing everywhere? Human ing isn't a word, Sarah pointed out, amused. It should be. It perfectly describes the way your species constantly sheds DNA, releases pheromones, and leaks emotions all over the place. Their debate was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. James Rodriguez, the Institute's new head of comparative biology. Hey, Sarah. Zell, my crystalline friend. He moved to give Dr. Zell a friendly pat on the back, causing them to quickly phase shift 3 feet to the left. Boundary protocols. Dr. Zell's translator shrieked. We discussed this. Sorry. James held up his hands apologetically. Still getting used to the no-touching thing. Though I have to ask, how do Arxians show friendly affection? Dr. Zell's color shifted to a scholarly blue. We synchronize our quantum frequencies to create harmonic resonances that, why are you both looking at me like that? That sounds an awful lot like holding hands, Sarah said with a grin. It is nothing like your primitive epidermis to epidermis contact. Dr. Zell protested, though their color had shifted to a suspicious pink. It's a highly sophisticated exchange of quantum information. James nodded sagely. And do these quantum resonances make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside? Arxians do not experience fuzziness. We simply enjoy the harmonic alignment of, oh, stop smirking. The conversation was saved by the arrival of the newest member of their team, Dr. KTX, an Arxian specialist in genetic algorithms who had specifically requested to study human reproduction methods. Fascinating news. KTX announced, their crystalline form practically vibrating with excitement. I've been analyzing human courtship patterns, and I believe I've identified a mathematical formula for what humans call love at first sight. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Really? Yes. It appears to be a complex interaction of visual input, pheromone detection, and quantum neural fluctuations that creates a cascading effect in human neurochemistry, leading to KTX, Sarah interrupted gently, love isn't really something you can reduce to a formula. But the patterns. The chemical reactions. The statistical correlations. Trust me, James added with a laugh, if love could be calculated, dating apps would be a lot more successful. KTX's antennae drooped. But how do you know when to initiate pair bonding without proper algorithmic validation? Sometimes you just know, Sarah said softly, trying not to notice how Dr. Zell's color had shifted to a deeper pink at her words. Just know? KTX's translator crackled with disbelief. That's not scientific at all. Where's the peer review? The controlled trials? Welcome to the messy world of human emotions, James grinned. Where the heart wants what the heart wants, and logic just along for the ride. The cardiac muscle makes mate selection decisions? KTX asked, frantically taking notes. Is this why humans clutch their thoracic region when experiencing strong emotions? The humans' attempts to explain metaphors to the literal-minded Arxians were interrupted by an urgent message from the Arxian High Council. They had reviewed the initial research proposals and had concerns. They want us to do what? Sarah exclaimed, reading the message. Create a comprehensive database of human mating rituals, including detailed documentation of courtship behaviors, physical interactions, and, oh my. Dr. Zell's color shifted to embarrassed purple as they continued reading. They do realize we can't just catalog people's private moments, right? James asked. Perhaps we could set up voluntary research participation? KTX suggested brightly. I've designed a questionnaire with only 47,392 items. No one is going to fill out a questionnaire that long, Sarah said firmly. But how else will we understand the precise mechanics of human cuddling? KTX protested. The variables involved are staggering. Body position, duration, pressure applied, temperature exchange, not to mention the seemingly random vocalizations. Cuddling isn't about mechanics, James tried to explain. It's about comfort, connection, showing affection. Through prolonged physical contact and bacterial exchange. Dr. Zell shuddered. Though, I must admit, I find myself curious about the reported psychological benefits. Sarah noticed their color shifting to that interesting pink again. Tell you what, Zell. Maybe we could start with something simple. Like why humans hold hands? A practical demonstration? Dr. Zell's antennae twitched nervously. For scientific purposes, of course? Of course, Sarah smiled. Purely research-related. As she carefully extended her hand toward Dr. Zell's crystalline form, she could have sworn she saw their usual geometric patterns shift into something almost like a heart. The resulting quantum resonance sent a warm tingle up her arm. Fascinating, Dr. Zell murmured. The emotional response is quite strong. Documenting. KTX announced excitedly, whipping out their recording device. First observed human Arxian physical interaction. Please rate your bacterial exchange comfort level on a scale of 1 to 1,000. KTX, everyone else shouted in unison. Meanwhile, James was trying not to laugh as he sent a message to the rest of the research team, alert, possible first instance of interspecies handholding. Project lead may be compromised by unauthorized quantum resonance. Send reinforcements. And popcorn. The Joint Institute was certainly going to be interesting. If they could just keep the Arxians from installing decontamination showers at every doorway. Breaking barriers and making history. The breakthrough happened on what started as an ordinary Tuesday at the Joint Human Arxian Institute. Sarah was reviewing research data when Dr. Zell burst into her office, their crystalline form pulsing with unprecedented colors. I had an emotion, they announced, causing Sarah to spill her coffee. You, what? An emotion. A genuine, unfiltered, non-quantum regulated emotional response. Dr. Zell was practically bouncing off the walls. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. Is this what being human feels like all the time? Before Sarah could respond, KTX and James rushed in, attracted by the commotion. What's happening? James asked. I heard screaming. Not screaming, KTX corrected, adjusting their sensors. Dr. Zell is experiencing elevated quantum fluctuations consistent with human-style emotional expression. Fascinating. Recording for posterity. It happened during movie night, Dr. Zell explained, still vibrating with excitement. We were watching that human entertainment program, The Notebook, and during the rain scene, I experienced what humans call feelings. Sarah tried not to laugh. you cried during the notebook? Arxians don't cry, Dr. Zell said primly. I merely experienced a temporary loss of quantum coherence accompanied by an inexplicable desire to consume frozen lactose products. That's literally crying and wanting ice cream, James pointed out. Impossible. KTX interjected. Arxians lack the biological structures for tear production. Although they studied Dr. Zell closely. Your crystalline matrix does appear to be exhibiting unusual refraction patterns. The implications are staggering, Dr. Zell continued, ignoring them. If prolonged exposure to human emotional expressions can trigger similar responses in Arxians, we may need to completely revise our understanding of interspecies empathy. The news spread quickly through both human and Arxian communities. The Arxian High Council called an emergency session to discuss the emotional contamination incident. Meanwhile, human social media exploded with headlines like "Alien Scientist Discovers Feelings Through Romance Movies, What's Next? Interspecies Dating." The Institute suddenly found itself at the center of a scientific and cultural storm. More Arxians began reporting unexpected emotional responses. Some were horrified, others fascinated. A small group even started a secret human culture appreciation club, where they watched romantic comedies and practiced expressing emotions in a safe, judgment-free space. This is unprecedented, Ambassador Xylix declared during an emergency meeting at the Institute. We're receiving reports of Arxians experiencing spontaneous emotional responses across the globe. Some have even been observed engaging in. They shuddered before continuing, public displays of quantum resonance. You mean they're holding hands? Sarah asked innocently. Without proper containment protocols. Ambassador Xylix's translator practically wailed. I don't see the problem, James said. Isn't cultural exchange the whole point of our alliance? But our young ones are being influenced, another Arxian official protested. Just yesterday, my offspring asked me to explain the concept of hugging. Did you explain it? Sarah asked, curious. I provided them with a 500-page technical manual on the biomechanics of human physical contact, the official admitted. They called it cringe and went to watch something called TikTok instead. Meanwhile, Dr. Zell was dealing with their own crisis. I find myself experiencing irregular quantum fluctuations whenever Dr. Chen enters the room, they confided to KTX during a private consultation. My crystalline structure exhibits unexplained warmth, and my thought patterns become statistically improbable. Classic symptoms of human romantic attraction. KTX announced excitedly. Shall I prepare the standard 47,392-item questionnaire? No. Dr. Zell's color shifted to alarmed pink. This is strictly confidential. If the High Council discovers I'm experiencing unauthorized feelings for a human. Too late. James called from the doorway, grinning. We all knew weeks ago. You turn pink every time Sarah speaks science. I do not. Dr. Zell protested, turning even pinker. The situation came to a head during the Institute's first annual Human Arxian Cultural Exchange Conference. Sarah was giving a presentation on the evolution of human courtship rituals when Dr. Zell suddenly stood up in the middle of the audience. I have an announcement, they declared, their voice trembling through the translator. I, Dr. Zell 427, leading xenobiologist of the Arxian Science Academy, have developed romantic feelings for Dr. Sarah Chen. The audience erupted into chaos. Several Arxians had to be treated for quantum destabilization. Human reporters started broadcasting live. KTX frantically tried to document everything while James shouted, finally, from the back row. Furthermore, Dr. Zell continued, approaching the podium, I no longer believe that human emotional expression is primitive or dangerous. It is beautiful, complex, and worthy of study. Also, they added, turning slightly purple, I would like to request permission to initiate a formal courtship ritual. Sarah stared at them, heart pounding. Are you asking me out on a date? I believe that is the correct human terminology, yes. Though I have prepared a 200-page proposal detailing my intentions and including all relevant safety protocols, Sarah cut them off by reaching out and initiating quantum resonance contact, or as humans would say, taking their hand. The entire audience gasped. "I'd love to," she said simply. Dr. Zell's entire form lit up with joy, creating a light show that put the aurora borealis to shame. KTX fainted from the excitement of documenting the first official human-Archean courtship declaration. James started a slow clap that turned into thunderous applause. The next day's headlines read, "Love Transcends Species, Human-Archean Romance Challenges Galactic Prejudices," and "Quantum Leap of the Heart, Science Meets Romance at Xenobiology Institute." The Archean High Council issued a formal statement: "While we maintain our concerns about unregulated emotional expression, we acknowledge that interaction with humans has opened new avenues of scientific and cultural understanding. Also, we are updating our protocols to include a section on acceptable parameters for interspecies dating." As Sarah and Dr. Zell left the institute that evening, they passed a group of young Archeans practicing human-style hugs, while wearing full biohazard suits, but still, progress. "You realize we've probably changed both our societies forever?" Sarah mused. "Indeed," Dr. Zell agreed. "Though I must ask, does this mean I need to learn about this human concept called meeting the parents?" Sarah laughed. "One step at a time, Zell. One quantum leap at a time. Love, science, and other catastrophes." The first official human-Archean date in history was going, interestingly. Sarah sat across from Dr. Zell at an upscale restaurant that had hastily installed quantum stabilization fields to accommodate their unique patron. Both were acutely aware of being watched by literally everyone: fellow diners, news drones hovering outside, and KTX, who had disguised themselves as a potted plant in the corner. "KTX, we can see you," Sarah called out. "Real plants don't have antennae." "Or take notes," Dr. Zell added as the plant frantically scribbled in a datapad. "I am merely documenting this historic moment for science." KTX protested, their crystalline form rustling against fake leaves. "Now, please continue your courtship behaviors naturally. Pretend I'm not here." "That would be easier if you weren't narrating everything we do," Sarah pointed out. "Subject A exhibits signs of mild irritation," KTX muttered into their recorder. "Subject B's crystalline matrix displays patterns consistent with what humans call embarrassment." Before either of them could respond, their waiter arrived, looking only slightly nervous about serving Earth's first interspecies couple. "Good evening," he said professionally. "Our chef has prepared a special menu featuring both traditional human cuisine and quantum-stabilized energy matrices for our Archean guests." "How thoughtful," Sarah smiled. "Indeed," Dr. Zell agreed. "Though I must ask, has the kitchen been properly sterilized according to Archean Protocol 7249B? "The restaurant has been certified by the Joint Health Commission," the waiter assured them. "We even installed a miniature particle accelerator in the kitchen." "Excellent. In that case, I'll have the quantum-infused photon soup, and... Sarah, would you be comfortable if I observed your human ingestion process? You want to watch me eat? For scientific purposes." Dr. Zell's color shifted to eager blue. "I've always been fascinated by the mechanical process of human nutrient consumption." From their corner, KTX's voice carried, "Subjects exhibit preliminary signs of mutual scientific curiosity, a common courtship behavior among academics." The evening progressed with a unique blend of romantic atmosphere and scientific inquiry. Dr. Zell was fascinated by everything from the way Sarah used utensils to the chemical reactions involved in human digestion. For her part, Sarah found Dr. Zell's method of absorbing energy through their crystalline matrix oddly beautiful. "Your atomic structure realigns so elegantly," she commented, watching the light play through their form. "You find my energy consumption process appealing?" Dr. Zell's color shifted to pleased pink. "Most humans seem disturbed by it." "I find everything about you appealing," Sarah said softly. Dr. Zell's entire form lit up like a disco ball. From the corner came KTX's excited whisper, BREAKTHROUGH. First observed instance of human-Archean flirtation. Multiple witnesses present. KTX, both Sarah and Dr. Zell said in unison, "Go away." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a commotion at the restaurant's entrance. A group of protesters had gathered, a mix of humans and Archeans opposed to interspecies relationships. "Unnatural," shouted one human protester. "Quantum contamination," cried an Archean. Sarah felt her heart sink, but Dr. Zell surprised her by rising to their full height, their form glowing with determination. "You want to discuss natural?" they addressed the crowd. "Let's discuss how natural it is for two sentient beings to develop mutual respect and affection. Let's examine the quantum mechanics of emotional connection." But the protocols," sputtered an Archean protester. "Protocols?" Dr. Zell's voice rang out. "I've studied human biology for months. Yes, they're messy. Yes, they're emotional. Yes, they exchange bacteria like it's going out of style." "Hey!" Sarah protested, amused despite herself. "But they also love without calculation. They feel without quantum regulation. They dive into the chaos of existence and emerge stronger. And I..." Dr. Zell's color shifted to deep rose. "I find that beautiful." The restaurant had gone silent. Even KTX had stopped narrating. Furthermore, Dr. Zell continued, "Really getting into it now. Preliminary research suggests that controlled exposure to human emotions can actually enhance Archean quantum stability. My own resonance patterns have never been stronger." "It's true." KTX burst out of their plant disguise, scattering fake leaves everywhere. "I've been monitoring Dr. Zell's quantum signatures for weeks. Their emotional integration metrics are off the charts." The protesters murmured uncertainly. One by one, they began to disperse, though several could be heard muttering about needing to review the data. As things calmed down, Sarah reached out to initiate quantum resonance contact with Dr. Zell. "That was incredible," she said softly. "I merely stated scientific facts," Dr. Zell replied, though their color remained a pleased pink. "Though I admit, I may have been influenced by these new emotional subroutines I'm developing." "Is that your scientific way of saying you care about me?" Yes. Though I'm still working on proper terminology for cross-species emotional expression. Perhaps we need to develop a new lexicon, dash." Sarah cut them off with a small kiss to their crystalline surface. Dr. Zell's entire form sparkled with surprise and joy. "Unprecedented physical contact," KTX shouted, falling out of their plant disguise entirely. "Must document formation of new biological protocols." But neither Sarah nor Dr. Zell were paying attention anymore. They were too busy discovering that love, like science, knew no species barriers. The next day's headlines read, "Love Wins, Xenobiologist Defends Human-Archean Relationship with Power of Science," and "Quantum Romance, New Study Shows Positive Effects of Human-Archean Emotional Exchange." The Archean High Council released another statement. "While we maintain our concerns about unregulated bacterial exchange, we acknowledge that Dr. Zell's quantum readings are impressively stable. Also, we are commissioning a study on the potential benefits of controlled emotional exposure." As Sarah and Dr. Zell left the restaurant, hand in quantum resonance, they passed a group of young humans and Archeans engaged in a lively debate about the physics of love. "You know," Sarah mused, "we might actually be changing the galaxy." "Indeed," Dr. Zell agreed. "Though I still don't understand why humans insist on throwing rice at mating ceremonies. The waste of carbohydrates is most inefficient." Sarah laughed. "Let's solve one cultural mystery at a time." Behind them, KTX emerged from a bush, their new hiding spot, still taking notes. Day 47 of Human Archean Courtship Study. Subjects continue to exhibit signs of mutual affection. Also, restaurants' quantum stabilization fields need adjustment. And I may be allergic to fake plants. When love and science collide. 1 year after the historic first date, the joint Human-Archean Institute was preparing for an event that would either make history or cause an interplanetary incident, the first Human-Archean wedding. The preparation process had been complicated. No, absolutely not. Dr. Zell's crystalline form flashed with alarm. We cannot have human wedding traditions without proper containment protocols. Do you know how many airborne particles are released during what you call dancing? Sarah, surrounded by wedding planning materials and scientific journals, tried not to laugh. Zell, dear, we've been over this. The venue will have quantum stabilization fields. But the cake? Dr. Zell protested. KTXS research indicates that humans often become emotional during cake consumption. The quantum fluctuations could be catastrophic. Speaking of KTX, their enthusiastic wedding planning had taken on epic proportions. They had produced a 1,000-page document titled Comprehensive Analysis of Human-Archean Union Ceremonies, a Scientific Approach to Romance. I've calculated the optimal quantum resonance frequencies for the ceremony, KTX announced, bursting into Sarah's office. Also, I've designed special containment suits for the human guests to minimize bacterial exchange. We're not putting my family in hazmat suits, Sarah said firmly. But think of the data collection opportunities. KTXS antennae wiggled excitedly. We could monitor their biological responses in real time. James, who had been appointed best man, despite some confusion from the Archeans about the term, poked his head in. Quick question, how do we handle the kiss at the end? The Archean Council is demanding a full risk assessment. Already prepared. KTX pulled out another document. I've designed a special force field that will allow quantum resonance while minimizing bacterial transfer. Though we may need to install emergency sterilization showers, just in case. The wedding preparations had become a fascinating blend of human tradition and Archean scientific precision. The venue was equipped with quantum stabilization fields and emotion monitors. The flower arrangements were carefully selected for minimal pollen dispersion. The wedding rings had been crafted with special quantum resonance crystals. The guest list was equally unique: human scientists, Archean researchers, diplomatic representatives from both species, and a small army of medical personnel, at the Archean Council's insistence. The big day arrived with all the dignity and chaos one might expect from such an unprecedented event. The venue sparkled with both traditional decorations and advanced scientific equipment. KTX, who had appointed themselves chief documentarian, was bouncing between guests with various scanning devices. Fascinating, they exclaimed, analyzing the readings. Human emotional responses are causing quantum fluctuations throughout the entire facility. Also, several Archean guests are exhibiting unprecedented levels of sentimental resonance. Sarah waited nervously in the preparation room, wearing a dress that had been specially designed to minimize static electricity, another Archean concern. Her mother dabbed at her eyes while Dr. Zell's parental units hovered nearby, their crystalline forms shifting through various shades of anxiety. We still don't fully understand this human tradition, one of them admitted. But Zell's quantum readings have never been more stable. Love tends to have that effect, Sarah's mother smiled. Meanwhile, Dr. Zell was having their own pre-ceremony crisis. But what if my vows aren't scientifically accurate enough, they fretted to James. I've included 17 references to quantum mechanics, but should I add more citations? Zell, James said patiently, wedding vows are about feelings, not peer review. Feelings? Dr. Zell's color shifted to panic purple. But I didn't prepare my emotional subroutines for public display. The ceremony itself was a beautiful blend of both cultures. The traditional wedding march was accompanied by a synchronized quantum light show. The officiator, a distinguished professor of xenobiology, had prepared a speech about love transcending biological barriers. When Sarah walked down the aisle, Dr. Zell's crystalline form lit up so brightly that several guests had to don protective eyewear. KTX could be heard frantically recording, subject exhibits unprecedented levels of quantum luminescence. Possible new form of energy production discovered? The vows were uniquely them. Sarah spoke of love and discovery, of finding wonder in their differences. Dr. Zell, true to form, included several scientific metaphors. Like quantum entanglement, our connection defies conventional explanation. Your presence alters my very atomic structure, creating resonance patterns that can only be described as love. Also, I prepared a 200-page appendix detailing the exact quantum mechanics involved. Save it for the honeymoon, Sarah whispered, causing several Arxian guests to rapidly look up honeymoon on their translators and promptly crash their systems. The kiss was indeed a technical marvel, involving carefully calibrated force fields and quantum harmonics. It also set off every scientific instrument in the building and caused KTX to short out their recording device in excitement. The reception that followed was equally memorable. Humans and Arxians mingled, sharing stories and comparing notes on love and science. The dance floor featured special quantum stabilization tiles that lit up in response to movement. Several young Arxians, inspired by human romance movies, attempted to recreate famous dance scenes, with varying degrees of success. The cake-cutting ceremony had to be preceded by a brief safety lecture from KTX about proper nutrient distribution protocols. Dr. Zell, in a moment of remarkable cultural adaptation, actually tried a bite of cake, causing several members of the Arxian Council to need emergency quantum recalibration. It's not entirely horrifying, they admitted, while KTX frantically documented the first recorded instance of an Arxian consuming human food. As the evening wound down, Sarah and Dr. Zell shared a quiet moment away from the chaos. Did you ever imagine, Sarah asked, when you were first horrified by human reproduction, that we'd end up here? Scientifically speaking, the probability was approximately 0.0000001%, Dr. Zell replied. Then, their color shifting to love pink, they added, but humans have taught me that some things transcend mathematical probability. I love you, Sarah said simply. I love you too, Dr. Zell replied. Even if your bacterial colonies are terrifying. From behind a nearby plant came KTX's voice. Day 365 of Human Arxian Relationship Study. Subjects continue to exhibit signs of pair bonding. Also, wedding cake contains alarming levels of sucrose, yet humans consume it voluntarily. Further research needed. The wedding made headlines across both worlds. Love and science unite. First human Arxian wedding creates new possibilities, and quantum wedding, new era of interspecies relations begins. The Arxian High Council's final statement read, while we maintain our concerns about everything, we acknowledge that love, like science, requires us to embrace the unknown. Also, we are reviewing our protocols regarding wedding dance floors. As Sarah and Dr. Zell prepared to leave for their honeymoon, which would involve both romantic destinations and several research laboratories, they knew they had changed the universe in their own small way. Love, it turned out, was the ultimate experiment, messy, unpredictable, and absolutely worth every moment of chaos. Even if it did require quantum stabilization fields. The next generation, a quantum leap of faith. 5 years after the historic wedding, the joint Human Arxian Institute was buzzing with unprecedented excitement. Sarah and Dr. Zell were about to announce the results of their most ambitious experiment yet. They were going to attempt to have a baby. Through science, of course. The quantum genetics lab is ready, KTX announced, practically vibrating with anticipation. We've installed triple redundancy containment fields, 17 different monitoring systems, and an emergency quantum stabilization array. Also, I prepared a new 100,000-page questionnaire for documenting every microsecond of the process. Sarah and Dr. Zell exchanged looks. KTX, Sarah said gently, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but maybe we could scale back the documentation a little? Scale back? KTX's crystalline form actually cracked slightly in horror. But this will be the first human Arxian hybrid in history. Think of the data. Our child will not be a research project, Dr. Zell said firmly, their color shifting to protective purple. Though they quickly added, at least not until they're old enough to consent to proper experimental protocols. The news of their planned parenthood spread quickly through both communities. The reactions were mixed. But how will it work? Humans asked. Will the baby be flesh or crystal? Will they have to wear a containment suit to family gatherings? What about quantum stability? Arxians fretted. Will the child experience unregulated emotions? Will they require bacterial exposure protocols? The Arxian High Council called an emergency session titled Implications of Cross-Species Genetic Recombination, a crisis management approach. Meanwhile, human social media exploded with speculation about what a human Arxian baby might look like. The actual process involved cutting-edge science from both worlds. Human genetic material was carefully quantum stabilized, while Arxian crystalline patterns were modified to accommodate organic components. The result would be something entirely new, a perfect blend of both species. The genetic sequencing is complete, Dr. James announced one day, looking up from his instruments. It's beautiful. The quantum patterns are integrating perfectly with the human DNA. Like they were meant to find each other, Sarah smiled, squeezing Dr. Zell's hand. Let's not get emotional about genetics, Dr. Zell protested, though their color had shifted to joyful pink. Though I must admit, the harmonic resonance is quite elegant. The pregnancy itself was unlike anything either species had seen before. Sarah carried the quantum organic embryo, while Dr. Zell provided constant crystalline energy through their quantum bond. KTX, naturally, documented every moment, though they had been convinced to reduce their questionnaire to a mere 10,000 pages. Fascinating, they exclaimed during one checkup. The fetus is exhibiting both biological growth and quantum crystallization. Also, their first quantum fluctuations appear to be forming heart-shaped patterns. Already expressing emotions, Sarah laughed. They take after their Arxian parent. I do not express emotions. Dr. Zell protested, while literally glowing with parental pride. The birth itself was a carefully orchestrated event involving both medical doctors and quantum physicists. The delivery room looked like a cross between a hospital and a particle accelerator facility. Push! Dr. James encouraged. Maintain quantum coherence, the Arxian specialists added. Documenting. KTX shouted from behind their mountain of recording equipment. When the baby finally arrived, the entire room fell silent in wonder. The child was perfect, a beautiful blend of human and Arxian characteristics. Their skin had a subtle crystalline quality that shifted with their emotions, while maintaining human warmth and softness. Their eyes sparkled with both literal and figurative starlight. Hello, little one, Sarah whispered. The baby responded by emitting a soft quantum pulse that filled the room with feelings of pure love. Several Arxian nurses had to be treated for emotional overload. Their quantum signatures are incredibly stable, Dr. Zell marveled, cradling their child. And their bacterial levels are, well, let's not think about that right now. They named the baby Luna Quantum Chen 427, honoring both their heritages. Luna, for Earth's moon that had witnessed their first date, and Quantum 4, well, obvious reasons. The child's first years were an adventure in innovative parenting. They had to baby-proof the house for both physical and quantum hazards. The nursery was equipped with a mini quantum stabilization field, though Luna quickly learned to modulate their own crystalline frequencies. They're crying. Dr. Zell panicked during one memorable night. Quick, check the quantum harmonic analyzer. They're crying because they're hungry, Sarah explained patiently. Not everything needs scientific analysis. Luna grew up with unique abilities and challenges. They could switch between mostly human and mostly crystalline forms at will. They had both a heartbeat and quantum pulses. They could eat both regular food and absorb energy through quantum resonance. The child's first words were "love you," simultaneously spoken and transmitted through quantum frequencies. KTX nearly fainted from the scientific implications. School was interesting. Luna attended both human classes and Arxian quantum education sessions. They excelled in both biology and quantum mechanics, though they had a tendency to make their teachers nervous by questioning why the subjects were taught separately. But Mom, they asked one day, why do humans think emotions and science are different things? Can't they feel the quantum patterns in their feelings? Sarah and Dr. Zell exchanged proud looks. Their child was already bridging worlds in ways they hadn't imagined. As Luna grew, they became living proof that love transcended all boundaries: physical, quantum, and cultural. Other human Archean couples began to follow in their parents' footsteps, leading to a whole new generation of hybrid children. The Archean High Council eventually established a Department of Quantum Organic Integration to handle the growing population of hybrid citizens. Their first policy document was titled Protocols for Playing with Human Archean Children, a guide to managing both scraped knees and quantum fluctuations. 10 years after Luna's birth, Sarah and Dr. Zell stood in their backyard, watching their child demonstrate their latest discovery. They had figured out how to create quantum bubble bath using both soap and crystalline energy. "I still can't believe we did it," Sarah mused. "We actually created something entirely new." "Indeed," Dr. Zell agreed. "Though I maintain that the bacterial exposure levels in that bubble bath are concerning." "Always the scientist," Sarah laughed. Speaking of science, KTX called from their permanent observation post in the garden. "I've just completed the 10-year analysis of Luna's development." "Only 50,000 pages. Would you like to review it now?" "Later, KTX," Sarah and Dr. Zell said in unison, watching their child play. Luna looked up at them, their crystalline-flecked skin glowing with joy, and transmitted a pulse of pure love that needed no scientific explanation at all. Though KTX documented it anyway, just in case.